subtle chain of countless rings, the next into the farthest brings. The eye reads omens where it goes, and speaks all languages, the rose. And striving to be man, the worm mounts through all the spires of form.
All right, guys, we're back with the Emerson tapes. This time we're going through nature. This is going to be part one of probably three or four because it's his most it's his first book and it's also his most dense book in terms of variety of topics. This is kind of like the groundstone for his whole philosophy and his whole body of literature from this point onward. Um, so like I said, this is his first book. He had been meditating on it for several years before he published it in 1836. He wrote it in the same room, actually, where Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote Moses from the Old Nance. And only 500 copies of Nature were published, and it was published totally anonymously. The book made a few friends in England, notably Thomas Carlyle, Richard Monckton Milnes, and John Sterling. But overall, especially in the domestic markets, it was not enthusiastically received as a whole, which is, we were talking before, this is just astounding that you can read this and go, it's mediocre. It was not reissued for 11 years later in 1847. So that's some context kind of on nature and how we got to this point.
Yes, this is one of my favorite works. This is actually the second Emerson work that I ever came across. The first thing I read was Self Reliance, and after reading Self Reliance, I was like, hey, I need to find a book by this guy. And the first suggestion that it had was Nature. And I really like this book. It actually has a special place for me because I've got my own copy with all my underlines in it. And my girl, her grandfather has a copy of this book. She has her grandfather's copy. He's no longer with us, but he's got all these different underlines and highlights in the book. And it's so funny to see, to look through his copy and look through my copy and see how certain similar things stood out to each of us. So I really like Nature. It's one of my favorite works, and we can jump in to it immediately with the introduction right before the first chapters, where Emerson starts off saying, "Our age is retrospective. It builds the sepulchres of the fathers, which is a monument. It it writes biographies, histories, and criticism. The foregoing generations beheld God and nature face to face, we through their eyes. Why should not we also enjoy an original relation to the universe? Why should not we have a poetry and philosophy of insight and not of tradition, and a religion by revelation to us, and not the history of theirs? Embosomed for a season in nature, whose floods of life stream around and through us and invite us, by the powers they supply, to action in proportion to nature, why should we grope among the dry bones of the past, or put the living generation into masquerade out of its faded wardrobe? The sun shines today also. There is more wool and flax in the fields. There are new lands, new men, new thoughts. Let us demand our own works and laws and worship." So in the intro here, he takes a big step where he's like, let's challenge everything of the past. Why are we beholden to these traditions and these ways of viewing the world? Why not create our own? Why not have our own philosophy? Why not everything he's saying, everything we experience through the eyes of our forefathers.
Right.
And that, in doing so, we stop experiencing things through our own eyes.
Right. It's like maintenance of the past comes before new experiences and adventures and new ways of thinking for the future. Kind of he's identifying a stale state of mind in the mid 1800s right now.
It's actually interesting how much he constantly challenges tradition, especially when you look at the way the world is today, where it's like everybody's trying to go back to tradition. And it's like the tradition people are going to, this guy was challenging it, which I think it shows that in whatever time you're living in, I think there's a balance where you have to respect tradition and try to look for the good out of it, but you also have to be looking to improve upon it and create
Right.
something better than the past. You can't be completely beholden of it. And I think sometimes there's maybe like an energetic shift where you're leaning more one way or more the other. Like, and sometimes, like times like today, we're in a time where we want to get some of the old back. And then things will change and be more the old way. And then people are going to push to want to get some of the new back, right? Like it constantly shifts left and right.
Right. The
Where,
eternal dialectic.
right, exactly. So it goes on to say, undoubtedly, we have no questions to ask which are unanswerable. We must trust the perfection of the creation so far as to believe that whatever curiosity the order of things has awakened in our minds, the order of things can satisfy. So, what he's basically saying here is the universe answers all who ask questions.
Right. Might not give you the answer that you want, but it'll give you an answer, that's for sure.
There's nothing that is unanswerable. The answer lies out there somewhere. And he caps us off by saying a quote that I really like. He says, every man's condition is a solution in hieroglyphic. So to me, what this means when I see this quote, every man's condition is a solution in hieroglyphic. To me, the word condition kind of means obstacle, right? Like I'm not a big fan of Ryan Holiday, but he has that book,
Mm-hmm.
The Obstacle is the Way. And every obstacle or every problem is actually it's growth in disguise, right? Every condition is a solution in hieroglyphic. So your obstacle is actually growth in hieroglyphic. You have to get over it to decode it and see that is actually beneficial to you, right? New level, new devils. New problems are a sign of progress and growth, right? Every injury I've had led me to discover more about the human body. Every inability I've had on the mats led me to becoming a better martial artist. Everything I've had to build or repair led me to be better at building things and at fixing things. What was a condition or an issue was actually growth and progression in
And this
disguise.
requires immense introspection as well. This is not a passive process. This is a, like you said, it's hieroglyphic, right? You don't just look at a hieroglyphic and understand it immediately. It takes research and comparison and, you know, thinking and analysis and all these things together, right? So you're, if there is a pain, if there's an obstacle in your life, you have to look at it head on. You have to treat it like its own project. You can't just, you know, you can't just hope it gets solved enough by staring at it.
Yeah, and you have to see it as movement and ascension to the next level and the next stage. Stop seeing it as something that's halting you, when really it's something that's
There we go.
vaulting you. All right, here's a good one. He goes on to say, towards the end of the introduction, he says, to sound judgment, the most abstract truth is the most practical. Whenever a true theory appears, it will be its own existence. Its test is that it will explain all phenomena. Now many are thought not only unexplained, but unexplicable, as language, sleep, madness, dreams, beasts, sex. So this was interesting to me because in a couple of sentences before, he's talking about science and how science's aim is to find the theory of nature and how we have these theories of race and functions. And we don't have this remote idea of like how creation happened or what creation was. And how we're getting so far from the road to truth and everything. And this quote really reminded me, it's like, it's weird. Like this scientific age created a lot of discovery, right? But now it seems like everything in a way is a mystery. Like in science search for knowledge and our acceptance of not knowing, we've begun to ignore the obvious of certain things. We always need a study or a reputable source to think something or to verify something that's easily noticeable and intuitive. And it's weird because at the beginning, science was this enlightening thing where now we're actually starting to understand what everything is. To now, it's at a point where we doubt our own intuition without the science
Hmm.
to back it. It feels like everything these days you need to study for it, and it's always inconclusive because there's always an opposing study that says the exact opposite thing. And it's like all these things like language, sleep, madness, dreams, beast, sex. Now it's like the intuitive answer for and most practical answer is usually the abstract truth of what these
Right.
things are. But because we live in this world where we've taken on this role of being limited in our understanding, we don't even trust our instincts anymore. And it's like this is why I don't like getting into like a lot of the science stuff because it's very nihilistic. Because a lot of the science today boils down to you don't know anything about anything and you're nothing but a
Yeah,
speck of
you're a
dust in the
talking
universe and you
monkey
know that.
on a spinning globe. Like you don't know anything. Blah blah blah. I mean, it's such a reductionist, and to me, it's a rejection of your own humanity, and basically every great scientist before you. No, nobody. No, there wasn't Neil deGrasse Tyson in like the 1600s. Like, oh, we are just monkeys on the universe, and it's so big. Blah blah blah. Just like, no, no, that wasn't happening. They were having dreams come to
Well,
them, and being open to that divine intuition and stuff.
yeah, like Neil deGrasse Tyson tells you that like the moon is just some stupid floating rock, but like in the ancient sense, like the moon is the nightlight of God. So it's like these guys take everything and reduce it to it's nothing and until it has no meaning. And we have to get away from that. And I think honestly, like and this is what we're saying, where it's always like a constant balance between the old and the current, where it's like we went through this process of learning how to figure out what's real and what's legit. And now it's time to go back to like instincts and move away from like the studies and go back to more of like a natural understanding and realization of the truths of the world and life.
Yep. This is Emerson articulating that meme that we keep seeing now, where it's the Doctor Manhattan, and it's like, where'd you get that information? Like, what's your source? And it's like, it came to me in a dream.
Right, exactly. you know, so right before he goes into the chapter of nature, he defines it by saying nature in the common sense refers to essences unchanged by man. Space, the air, the river, the leaf. Art is applied to the mixture of his will with the same things, as in a house, a canal, a statue, a picture. But his operations taken together are so insignificant, a little chipping, baking, patching, and washing, that an impression so grand as that of the world on the human mind, they do not vary the result. So it basically says nature is all of the things that you see around you. They're mountains, they're rivers, it's grass, it's animals, but it's also houses and structures and art and all these things that we've built using nature. Like one thing that I always find fascinating to think about is that you look at this material world around you and you see all these powerful structures, these buildings, these cars, these tables, chairs, anything physical around you that doesn't resemble plants or animals that we've built. What we have to remember is that everything that we have was here already. We haven't outsourced a single thing. Everything we've created from nature. And so, in a sense, nature is all around us at all times, regardless. And we're not talking about like landscapes or the wind or plants. Like everything
Mm.
is actually nature in a sense, right? Because we didn't get it from anywhere else. It was here. And we took an idea in our head and a vision and we added work and toil and we're able to transmute that idea from our head into the material world with the resources
But
that
yeah,
we
you
have
could
around
trace anything
us.
back to the most simplest form, and you'll find some base in nature, whether that was some mineral mined or some tree chopped down or something like that.
or just the
Yep.
discovery and use of fire.
And I think this
You know,
this section is another great example of how Emerson can say so much in such a tiny area, just two sentences. He defined nature and he defined art. Like that's something that people have philosophical debates on today, and he did it in, you know, two sentences.
so first chapter, nature. To go into solitude, a man needs to retire as much from his chamber as from society. I am not solitary whilst I read and write, though nobody is with me. But if a man would be alone, let him look at the stars. The rays that come from these heavenly worlds will separate between him and what he touches. One might think the atmosphere was made transparent with this design, to give man in the heavenly bodies the perpetual presence of the sublime. If the stars should appear one night in 1,000 years, how would men believe and adore, and preserve for many generations the remembrance of the city of God which had been shown? But every night come out these envoys of beauty, and light the universe with their admonishing smile. So, a little Starry Night appreciation there.
Which is amazing.
I like reading things like this because it just makes me remind myself to
Yep.
appreciate everything a little bit more. Like, imagine if the stars only came out once every 1,000 years. What a spectacle that would be! Everybody
Yep.
would be outside
And we
staring
just
at
take it
them.
for granted.
But because we just take it for granted completely, like it's really one of the most
Or
spectacular
worse,
things
even worse,
imaginable. Is that you
we
look
choose to move into places where we can't see them at night.
right. No, it's not even a factor in people's mind anymore. Like living in a places where they could see the sky. You know, like people don't even consider that. Most of the people in cities aren't saying, "Oh, it sucks. I can't even see the stars because of light pollution." They're not even aware of it. It's just like it doesn't even matter to them. You know, so it's like we're really we're blessed, more blessed than we know. And this is actually a common theme throughout this chapters. He just points out all the ways that we're actually just blessed by nature and blessed to be in the world that we're in. You know, he says the stars awaken a certain reverence because, though always present, they are inaccessible. But all natural objects make a kindred impression when the mind is open to their influence. So he's saying this all natural objects make the same type of impression on you when your mind is open to be influenced by it. So when you're paying attention to it, when you're aware of it, when you're appreciating it, if you just let everything is
Yep.
beautiful if you look for the beauty in it.
Nature never wears a mean appearance. You know, I always think of like when I thought of that, the first image that came into my mind is like a wolf with a chunk of deer in its mouth, just covered in blood or something, right? And even in that image, right? Like there's something beautiful in that.
Yes, he actually touches on something similar to this a little later on. But yeah, so nature never wears a mean appearance. Neither does the wisest man extort her secret and lose his curiosity by finding out all of her perfection. This is actually really funny because this neither does the wisest man extort her secret and lose his curiosity by finding out all her perfection. It kind of it's got a little bit of like a sexual context to me because it reminds me of like a man who really pedestalizes a woman and then he gets really close with her and finally acquires her and then doesn't view her the
Right.
same
He
way as he
starts
did
no he
once he
starts
has her.
he snaps back to reality and realizes, "Oh, it's she's just a human too, and she has human flaws. Uh-oh.
Right. It's like
I don't like this. It's not my fantasy."
right. Or you can go non sexual and say it's like, well, this is why you should never meet your idols, right? Because it humanizes them to you and then you'd be like, oh, okay, they're regular just
Right.
like me. Like I was pedestalizing them, but that's not how it works. And what he's saying is the wisest man can't do this to nature. He's like, there's always going to be another secret or more curiosity or more to learn.
Yeah, there's always another level.
You can never discover all of her
There's always
perfection.
another level to everything, to the whole natural. It's way too
And he
complex for one person to fully understand every aspect of it.
It says nature never became a toy to a wise spirit. The flowers, the animals, the mountains reflected the wisdom of his best hour as much as they had delighted the simplicity of his childhood.
Something about the yeah, there's like a recurring theme in Emerson, right? Of like coming back to nature, it's coming back to your. It's almost like it reveals the inner child again. It reveals the that childlike curiosity and love for life again, coming back into the woods and walking around the forest and whatnot.
Yeah, it's it. You know what? It's both. Like when I'm in nature, I have a feeling of being wise, and I have a feeling of
Mm.
being a child again at the same time. When I'm in nature, I start to look at everything in the past and become appreciative and understand everything. And then I also feel free and playful and alive
Yeah,
and young again. So it's like I get both those feelings. I get the feeling of being a wise elder statesman that's putting together the universe and decoding or deciding what everything is. And I also get the feeling of being the helpless, free
yeah, feeling
spirited
like you
child.
have life figured out in one hand, but also just like being so open to the wonder that you're walking around a forest. That's awesome, right? That just that like that basic fact alone, you can't help but ignite that childlike love.
Yeah, because it's like the sense of awe puts everything in perspective, in the perfect perspective. It puts the past in perspective, it puts the future in perspective, and it puts the present in perspective. This is interesting. It says, to speak truly, few adult persons can see nature. Most persons do not see the sun. At least they have a very superficial seeing. The sun illuminates only the eye of the man, but shines into the eye and the heart of the child. The lover of nature is he whose inward and outward senses are still truly adjusted to each other, who has retained the spirit of
That's
infancy
what we are just
even
talking
into the
about.
era of manhood. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. His intercourse with heaven and earth becomes part of his daily food.
See, this reminds me a lot of like, the past 5 years, there's been a whole push with like mindfulness and gratitude and whatnot. That seems like a really like watered down version of this, which is just, you know, reconnecting your mind with your body and not just like a mental thing, like writing down the 5 things you're gracious for. No, just like spending every waking moment filled with gratitude and constantly like being in the present and being connected to everything on an experiential level instead of like a more intellectual or like task level like these modern like gratitude and mindfulness books are.
In the presence of nature, a wild delight runs through the man, in spite of his real sorrows. Nature says, he is my creature, and in spite of his impertinent griefs, he should be glad with me. So he's talking about how the outdoors is like the original
Yep.
pick me up. Your problems and sorrows seem to dissipate. He actually goes on to like kind of contradict us a little bit later,
It'll be interesting to point out.
but or maybe show that there's another side of nature where it matches your mood as well. But what we know is that going outside is one of the quickest ways to get a state change
Mm-hmm.
and getting away from everything. I mean, half the problem of today's world is just people are just inside and confined, and it's just going to make them sad. And they don't. You need to get out into the world to exercise that sadness. And being outside, it's grounding, right? Like it's literally just grounding to go outside. And it settles you and gives you more perspective. It says, not the sun or the summer alone, but every hour and season yields its tribute of delight. For every hour and change corresponds and authorizes a different state of the mind, from breathless noon to grimmest midnight. Nature is a setting that fits equally well in comic or mourning piece. So you
Yeah.
find every state of being in nature. You know, the dawn feels different than the dusk. The sun feels different than the rain.
Reading this
You know,
again where he says, nature says he is my creature, and McGraw, all his impertinent Greece, he shall be glad with me, right? Well, I think that the more I'm reading it, I think it does fit with that next line about the different states because having the having nature change its state, to kind of fit your current condition, right? That can help you a work through it because it externalizes it, and then b it also it's like a puzzle piece, right? It fits and it fills the mood and allows you to experience it on a cohesive level.
Here he says, in the woods too a man casts off his years, as the snake is slow, and at what period soever of life is always a child. In the woods is perpetual youth. I like that. In the woods is perpetual youth. In the woods we return to reason and faith. There I feel that nothing can befall me in life, no disgrace, no calamity which nature cannot repair. Standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air, and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part or parcel of God. So there's something about being out there that makes you realize that you're one part of the whole. Like we spend so much time being individual units. And this time outdoors really connects you to the whole because literally when you go back outside, you enter into the
Hmm,
food chain again,
that's interesting. Yeah.
right? That's what people say about pets. Like your pet gets killed, like a common saying is to say, well, if you let your animals outside, they're going back into the food chain. So they're going back into nature. They're going
Yep.
back into being a part of the whole. And that's the same thing that happens to us when we go outdoors, is we're going back into being part of the whole. I actually had this revelation once when I was doing a little bit of psychedelics, where I was like, I was like, rooms and structures and indoors are kind of like
Yeah.
wombs. They're protecting you from the outside world. I think this is part of the pull why people get stuck indoors so easily, is because they're protected. They're not in the
Oh
food chain
yeah.
like
You
we
don't
were
have to
saying,
interact with anybody. There's no challenges. You don't have to keep your guard up.
right? So it's like stepping out into the world is like being born again every time, opening yourself up to new opportunity, new
It's interesting.
possibilities, new probabilities. And they sound the
Room,
same.
womb,
Room,
tomb.
womb, tomb. Because what's the tomb? The tomb is the exit. The womb was the entrance.
Interesting.
And then what are doorways? Like a birth canal, right? Like walking through it into one world to the next. Little schizo artist take, but that's really what's going on. I really think about this. It's like a real thing. And I think that people don't want to go through that process of severing off from the comfort of indoors, going back out into the
Yeah,
world.
I
And
mean, so
it's like
much of
life starts all
our,
over again.
just so much of our behavior is imprinted by that early experience with the womb. So much of it.
Like, I don't want my kids to be inside ever. Like, I want them to spend
So
90% of their time
somebody
outside. I'm
tweeted about
serious.
this. They said like the rule for my kids is sun's out, you're out.
Yeah, like, I want them outdoors. Like, I
Yep.
even want them getting schooled outdoors. I don't want them to be comfortable being inside. I want them to be out in the world and be comfortable being out doing things and creating and building and growing. I don't want them to be sheltered. Literally, think about it. Leaving a kid inside all day is sheltering them.
Yep. No, I grew up too much like that, so I had to personally involve myself into hardship with like MMA sparring and stuff like that, to kind of neuter that weakness.
Here he goes. He says, I am the lover of uncontained and immortal beauty. In the wilderness, I find something more dear and connate than in streets or villages. In the tranquil landscape, and especially in the distant line of the horizon, man beholds somewhat as beautiful as his own nature. Oh, here's the part that I was talking about where I said, it kind of contradicts itself, where he says, you'll always be pleased with nature, right? When you leave from it. But he says, it's certain that the power to produce delight does not reside in nature but in man, or in harmony of both. It is necessary to use these pleasures with great temperance, for nature is not always tricked in holiday attire, so it's not always dressed up in holiday attire. He's basically saying so. But the same scene which yesterday breathed perfume and glittered as for the frolic of the nymphs is overspread with melancholy today. Nature always wears the colors of the spirit. To a man laboring under calamity, the heat of his own fire hath sadness in it. Then there is a kind of contempt of the landscape felt by him, who has just lost by death a dear friend. So that's the part that was interesting to me, where it's like nature
I
always
can't
wears the colors
articulate
of
it
the spirit.
properly, but it seems like there's a tinge of like what we would call quantum theory today, where like the environment changes if there's an observer. It seems like if the spirit and the soul are interacting with nature, there's a there's a change on some level.
To man laboring under calamity, the heat of his own fire hath sadness in it. Interesting to think about. I'm trying to think of like examples of different experiences and or weather that change has like puts me in more than one mood. Like maybe sometimes it rains and I'm excited because it's raining, or maybe sometimes it rains and it makes me be
I'll
more
tell you
pensive and
this.
think about
This
the
might not be
past.
exactly what he's talking about, but something I noticed is that when it's gray skies, but you're near the woods, it's in the woods, it's fine. Like you're happy, you're all that good stuff. If it's gray skies and you're in a and all you see is buildings, especially poorly modern American buildings, it's extremely depressing on an immediate sensory level.
Yes, I can see that. I think it's also just part of it is nature's in a way
Yeah.
a reflection of yourself, right? Like you're gonna find because we
Hmm.
are a part of nature. So when you're in it, you're gonna find something similar. You're gonna find something similar to what you
Right.
find
It's
in
that
yourself.
mirror.
Exactly. It's like a mirror. Like if you're a person that's going through hardship, summiting a mountain is overcoming that problem.
Yep.
That's what it feels like, right? Whereas if maybe you're a person who is extremely happy, summiting a mountain feels like a celebration. So it can go both ways. It's a reflect in some sense, nature reflects who you are. But I think that even if it's a little melancholy, it still does you good because, like we said, it still puts everything in perspective. So, move on to the next chapter, which is called commodity. So, he gives a definition for commodity. He says, under the general name of commodity, I rank all those advantages which our senses owe to nature. And that's his definition of it.
This one's interesting because
So,
we grew up in a culture where commodity means like thing that is sold, right? And so he's using a completely different definition. So it took me a bit to apply his definition to that word and um, understand what he was saying here.
yeah, this is one of the harder ones for me to understand, but he's got some fire. There's some fire quotes in here.
Yeah, he says, yet although low, because when we're talking about senses, we're talking about, base animal instincts. Although it is low, it is perfect in its kind and is the only use of nature which all men apprehend. The misery of man appears like childish petulance when we explore the steady and prodigal provision that has been made for his support and delight on this green ball which floats him through the heavens. See, Neil deGrasse Tyson, that's how you describe these. That's how you describe us.
So this is actually one of my favorite passages right after this, where he says, "What angels invented?" He said, "What angels invented these splendid ornaments, these rich conveniences, this ocean of air above, this ocean of water beneath, this firmament of earth between, this zodiac of lights, this tent of dropping clouds, this striped coat of climates, this fourfold year, beasts, fire, water, stones, and corn serve him. The field is at once his floor, his workyard, his playground, his garden, and his bed." And he mentions a quote here. He says, "More servants wait on man than he'll take notice of." So what this really reminded me of is a book I read called The Hidden Life of Trees. And in part of this book, they discuss like the complex ecosystem of a forest or a jungle and how many different living organisms are inside of it. Like there's more microorganisms in a handful of soil than there are stars in our solar system, right? And they talk about how these forests and jungles make sure that everything can survive. Everything has something to feed off of, and everything has something that it cooperates with to survive. Nature ensures that everything in those ecosystems has a way of surviving and reproducing. And what this reminded me was exactly of that. Like the world provides for us. It ensures our existence.
Yeah, it's like he's talking about like the base material system of life, and it the incredible nature of it is that everything interplays and everything is perfectly aligned to ever sustain itself. It's like, yeah, you don't. This is not even into the beauty. This is not even into the theological stuff that he gets into later. This is purely like just the raw the raw materials of Earth are unbelievable. They're incredible, and you know they sustain everything. It's a perfect system. Yeah, it's a perfect
They
system.
create the life. Yeah, he's like, that's what I said. That quote is so fire. He said, "More servants
Yeah,
wait
we're
on
walking
man than
around,
he'll take
we're
notice of."
just in our own heads, in our own lives, worried about what the guy on LinkedIn said or whatever, and we're not noticing all this stuff. The land that allows us to traverse, the soil that brings us the food that we eat, right? All these things, we don't take note of it.
Nature, in its ministry to man, is not only the material, but is also the process and the result. All the parts incessantly work into each other's hands for the profit of man. The wind sows the seed, the sun evaporates the sea. The wind blows the vapor to the field. The ice on the other side of the planet condenses rain on this. The rain feeds the plant feeds the animal, and thus the endless circulations of the divine
Yeah,
charity nourish man. I like that. Nature in the
yeah,
world is divine
divine
charity
charity.
to
I
man.
love that.
Oh, look, he goes on later. This is actually really interesting. He says, "The private poor man hath cities, ships, canals, bridges built for him. He goes to the post office, and the human race run on his errands. To the bookshop, and the human race read and write all that happens for him. To the courthouse, and nations repair his wrongs. He sets his house upon the road, and the human race go forth every morning and shovel out the snow and cut a path for him." So it's like even like forget the nature stuff. It's like the whole entire world is built to ensure your survival. Like other people ensure your
Yeah,
survival as well,
exactly.
right? So even the poor man has this.
Yeah, and I mean,
Even the homeless man has a bench to sleep on because
yeah,
of other people.
we're a microcosm of nature. We're just one aspect, and so we live out that system amongst ourselves. We're attracted to harmonious systems for a reason.
And yeah, there's competition and all these things. That's how species grow and move forward. But we're always like we're moving towards something, and everything. I think we just all need to take a
Yeah.
moment to be more appreciative of how many things work in our favor on a daily
That was
basis.
my biggest takeaway of this entire of the entirety of nature. Just he is pointing out things that, like language, for example, right? We're using language right now. We use language every single day. We tweet, we do all that stuff. But he just points out some basic things about language. Just points out some basic things about, like, what is beauty. He just breaks it down, and it just allows you to appreciate it so much more. You're just looking at it and going, "Wow!" Like, can't believe this is free and just it's free and it's unlimited. And yeah, this is just how we live. It's amazing.
And what I really like about this is he points out all these beautiful facts about nature being in ministry to man, and even a poor man has his life taken care of him by others. It's like, what do we do with all that beautiful information? He ends it with one sentence where he says, "A man is fed not that he may be fed, but that he may work." So that's the conclusion that you draw from all of this, is that you have all of these things on your side and in your favor, and you don't have them just so that you can be fed. You are fed and provided for so that you may work, so that you may accomplish something and do something in this world
Yep.
and make some sort of impact. Right? Like, it's not just, these things aren't given to you so you could just sit there and be whatever and do whatever. They're bestowed upon you so that you can do something great with them.
Yeah. Might be his some of his Puritan upbringing coming out right there. That reminds me of that meme, like the Anglo meme, where it's like, go to work, come home, play work simulator or something. Should we transition to beauty?
Yeah, let's go. That was
And
a
also too, I'm just
last
gonna add a note. When you read this, the
paragraph.
last paragraph is just him saying, "But there's no need of specifying particulars in this class of uses. The catalog is endless, and the examples so obvious that I shall leave them to the reader's reflection." Right? He's just like, "I'm not. I don't need to write out anymore. You guys just look at reality, and you'll figure it out."
Yeah, I don't need to put out, he doesn't need to list all of the amazing things that are working in your favor. Actually, you should go and try and list them
Yeah,
yourself.
that's
It'd
your
be more
homework. Everyone
beneficial
listening to
that way.
this, go outside when you're done reading this. Get a notepad and write down all the things that are amazing and beautiful about nature. There you go.
I actually think about this a lot when I'm on like hikes and there's like any sort of trails dug in. I'm like, man, it's amazing that, like, even when you want to go out to nature,
Yeah.
like, you rely on other people and what they've done in the world. Like, even in the most extreme sense, like, look at some of these like free solo climbers and stuff like that, and like the rock and these ice climbers. Like, they had to have other people go up there and figure out a path or a route before they could even go
Yep,
out
all
there and
those national
appreciate it
parks,
themselves.
right? Some dude had to
So it's
walk
like,
in there with a machete, with some, some, surveying equipment and whatnot, and cut out a path. Physically uproot branches, uproot bushes, cut a path out so we can walk there.
everything that you enjoy, everything that is easy or convenient stands on the
Yep,
shoulders of hardship. Someone had to suffer at some point for you to have all that you have. And that should motivate you to do the work that you need to do and to make the most out of the time that you have on this planet, because everything is built on sacrifice. And remember, I can't, which essay was it where he says self-sacrifice is the miracle out of which all other miracles grow.
that is true.
So everything that we have, it came from sacrifices of other people's
Yep.
time and
And
lives
going back
and
to
energy and effort.
the very last sentence again, a man is fed, not that he may be fed, but that he may work, right? It's to continue the cycle so the man behind you can get fed as well.
Right.
All right, let's go to beauty because and this one is very interesting, and this is one of those ones where there's so many lines that you just go wow, and you just sit there for a minute like that explains so like it feels like a piece just got added, to the back of your head that was missing.
So the first point that I noticed that he says about beauty is that the eye is the best of artists. By the mutual action of its structure and of the laws of light,
Mhm.
perspective is produced, which integrates every mass of objects, of what character soever, into a well colored and shaded globe, so that where the particular objects are mean and unaffecting, the landscape which they compose is round and symmetrical. And as the eye is the best composer, so light is the first of painters. There is no object so foul that intense light will not make beautiful. And the stimulus it affords to the sense and sort of infinitude which it hath, like space and time, make all matter gay. Even the corpse has its own beauty. So he says the eye is like responsible. The eye and light are responsible for beauty. I mean, like
Yeah.
without the eyes to see and the light to light it
Well,
up,
yeah. Yeah, without
there
our
is no beauty.
subjective perception, there's yeah, it relies on the human, and that there comes back to the man being part of nature. There's like interplay, right, between man and nature.
Yeah, and like it also makes you think about this statement that the
Yep.
eye is the window to the soul. So it's the eye and the light that bring beauty to everything in the most base sense. So he tries to break down the aspects of beauty into three different things. It says the first is the simple perception of natural forms, is a delight. So to the body and mind, which have been cramped by noxious work or company, nature is medicinal and restores their tone. The tradesman, the attorney, comes out of the den and craft of the steel and sees the sky and the woods, and is man again. In their eternal calm, he finds himself. The health of the eye seems to demand a horizon. We're never tired so long as we can see far enough. So, to the body and mind that have been cramped by noxious work and company, nature is your medicine and will restore you. When you walk into the woods, you become a man again. In the eternal calm, you will find yourself. And what I like what he says here is like, the health of the eye seems to demand a horizon. We are
And
never tired so
that's
long as
so
we can
fun.
see
Like
far
even
enough.
taking that in the most literal level, right? People like Dr. Huberman or whatever are like, you must stare at far, uh, you know, it's like staring at the horizon for X minutes per day is necessary for long term eye health, right? And like staring at screens, um, right in front of our faces. So that's really funny that even on the most reductionist literal sense, that's true.
Right. And actually, it builds on his first point where he's talking about the eye is the key to everything because having stereo vision or binocular vision is one of our greatest gifts besides opposable thumbs.
Hmm.
Because like everything that humans do movement wise is not that impressive, like compared
Yeah,
to
we have to
animals.
train really
But
hard
the
to get decent movement compared to other animals.
but the way we can see and scan a horizon is a huge advantage to us because we don't have the same movement as them. And that is true that I do. When I first read this, before ever, I read this a few years ago, and before ever even looking at like the effects of eyes on like screens or anything like that, I had an instant um, intuition that you really need to be looking at huge landscapes, and like I believe it'll probably make your eyesight better. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah, probably. I mean,
Like I wouldn't be surprised. Like if you're just trying to constantly see as far as you can and absorb as much as you can and looking out upon things, like that's got to be healthier for your eye than staring at these
yep.
concentrated little focal points. Like what do they say that like people who like reading actually like damages your vision, right?
Reading. Um,
Like I've
I mean
heard that like
that's like the old
reading
wives' tale, right? Oh, if you don't read with yeah, if like you
is
read in
it.
like dim light, you'll lose your sight or whatever.
I'd have to look into it, but I imagine that the bigger that things you look at and
Yeah.
scan, it's healthier for you, and it's also just healthier for training your like sense of awareness and of
Yep.
what's going on in your surroundings. And I take it another way where it's not just literally about like the healthier eyes, is we're never tired so long as we can see far enough. For me, that's not about sight, that's about vision.
Mm,
Like the bigger your vision is, the more energy you're
yeah.
going to have to put towards it. If you can't literally see far enough into the future and you're only just like stuck in like thinking about your current situation and looking at your current day and your current life, you're going to have
Right.
less energy to work towards things. You're never tired as long as you can see far enough. As long as the vision is big enough and the drive towards it is big enough, you're not going to be fatigued. You're going to move
And I
towards
love
it
that distinction
energetically
you
and
made
powerfully.
between vision, right? Because there's physical vision, but then there's also the vision that you have for life. And both of these are using language of the eyes. And we refer to it as the mind's eye
Right.
in some senses.
Yes, yes, I look at it the same way. But as long as you are focused on the horizon, on what's coming up, you're going to make it. Right. Like that's where the
And
drive
so
and
many of these
energy is going to come
metaphors
from.
are so
As long as
multi-layered.
you can see.
They make sense on a literal level, on an immediate physical level, on a spiritual level, on a metaphorical level, all these different things.
So this is a passage that I like just because I think it's just really well written. He says, "But in other hours, nature satisfies by its loveliness, and without any mixture of corporeal benefit. I see the spectacle of morning from the hilltop over against my house, from daybreak to sunrise, with emotions which an angel might share. The long, slender bars of cloud float like fishes in the sea of crimson light. From the earth, as a shore, I look out into that silent sea. I seem to partake its rapid transformations. The act of enchantment reaches my dust, and I dilate and conspire with the morning wind. How does nature deify us with a few and cheap elements? Give me health in a day, and I will make the pomp of emperors ridiculous. The dawn is my Assyria, the sunset and moonrise my Paphos, and unimaginable realms of fairy. Broad noon shall be my England of the senses and the understanding. The night shall be my Germany of mystic philosophy and dreams."
Yeah, I just love how that's written.
Yeah, see, it made me want to like
Yeah,
go and
all
describe
this is wanting
nature
me to do
myself,
right now is
write
just to
about
go
myself.
outside.
I want to go outside. It's for me now. I'm at the point where it's like not even just about being outside anymore. It's about like taking
Yeah,
specific note of things and getting really good at absorbing my environment and finding ways to describe it that excite me and remind me of how awesome it is.
definitely. Definitely. The yeah, it never stops. You can always reach another level.
Here's a good one. The inhabitants of cities suppose that the country landscape is pleasant only half the year. I please myself with the graces of the winter scenery, and they believe that we are as much touched by it as by the genial influences of summer. To the attentive eye, each moment of the year has its own beauty, and in the same field it beholds every hour, a picture which is never seen before, and which shall never be seen again. The heavens change every moment, and reflect their glory or gloom on the plains beneath. The state of the crop in the surrounding farms alters the expression of the earth from week to week. The succession of native plants in the pastures and roadsides, which make the silent clock by which time tells the summer hours, will make even the visions of the day seem sensible to a keen observer. The tribes of birds and insects, like the plants punctual to their time, follow each other, and the year has room for all. So what I like about this is because like we're in like there's so many people that are just like, oh, sun max all the time. Like I find beauty personally in every season.
Yep.
I like all weather. Like I like a little winter. I like a stormy day. I like the changing of the leaves in the fall. One of the reasons why I wanted to get out of Miami is because it didn't have
Hmm.
seasonal changes. Like it's nice to live in a tropical environment and have sun all the time, but there's something bigger going on here with nature. Seasons have different lessons and different moods to them. What I noticed was living in somewhere like Miami, it's like I never got that holiday cheer or that spirit or that like sense of like family time that
Yeah,
comes
it's
with
like
it
a
every year.
eternal, like summer, right? The reaping
It's like
season, the party
yeah, it's
season, right? It's like an eternal party.
right. Like spring and summer are supposed to be the times where like you're out in the world and you're meeting people and everything's excited. And then you get towards the fall and it's like you're collecting everything and getting prepared for the winter. And the winter is when you're around the people that you're closest with and your family and spending time and appreciating each other and thinking about how you can make the next year and the next harvest better. Like these seasonal changes are are good for people. And even if you, I mean, everybody has their different theories of why the world is the way it is, and some people are more advanced than others. But a big theory, I think, in that Guns, Germs, and Steel, which I didn't really like that book, but they talk about how seasonal changes were a huge advantage for Europeans. Whereas if you're in Africa and you're in a constant struggle for survival every single day, because always summer, it's always hot, and there's droughts and all these things like that, you don't have the winter to sit inside and prepare and think about the spring or the summer and what you can do
Yeah,
next
that
year to
reminds me
advance
like
and be
what
better.
Benjamin talked about with like his like Nordic blood, how he's conditioned for winters to like like burst work during the spring and summer so he can plan ahead and have enough food stock for the winter. That's like deeply in his blood, and that's how he looks at lots of things, which is I found very interesting.
Yeah, it reminds me of the book Seasons of Life by Jim Rohn, which everybody should read because he does a better job of breaking this down than I ever could. But he just explains how every season has its own
Yep.
energy and its own mood, and there are certain things that you can learn from each one, and they're all great for what they are.
So basically, what you're saying is people who live in like Tennessee and Utah are just just closest to God because they have all the seasons, but mild versions of all of them.
Right, exactly. That was actually on my mind when deciding where I wanted to live. Is like I want to live in a place that gets every season, but like not an extreme version of it. Because I get it. Like winter for 6 months out of the year sucks. Like it's not fun. It's in and summer for 10 months out of the year sucks too. So the perfect balance is to find somewhere where you get a little bit of each, where the summers aren't too hot and the winters aren't too long.
Exactly. You want like a yeah, you want the balance because like you said, everything every season teaches something.
And even every type of weather teaches something. Like a rainy day is good every now and then. It's a chance to reflect and be inside with your
That's
thoughts.
funny. I'm not a climate guy, so I don't know if this means anything, but I just got a I looked up. I'm on looking at like the a world map with the equator and all the latitude longitudinal lines, and Tennessee, that area is very closely aligned to Israel Palestine area, which is very interesting. Like in terms of where Christian the Christian religion flourished and whatnot.
Tennessee has the most churches per
That's
capita of
funny.
like any state, I think. Like
Yeah,
via the population, like especially East Tennessee. There's no like higher concentration of churches
I was thinking of
in the country than
seasons
in there.
too. Like the I'm very curious about that now. Now the more I think about it, like if there's correlations between of certain places with similar climates and whatnot.
Well, they say genius rarely comes from warm climates. And I remember there were some studies about actual
Yeah,
children's brain development in different climates. Like I seriously, I think like the heat
I
all the time melts your brain a little bit, and it puts you in a automatically like a constant
I
state of
have
relaxation.
there has to be some because what I've learned is that no matter how hard something is pushed as truth, it seems like there's always a counterpoint that comes up that soon overtakes it. And to me, it's really suspicious that on our side of the internet, there's no counterforce. It's just like sun all the time is good, and it seems like we're missing something. And I feel like it's going to take us a bit to get that.
Yeah, we are. Where do people think
Yeah.
people are idiots at? Florida and California. Think you got the dumb surfer type dudes that like people characterize from coming out of California. And then you got the Florida man. And
Yeah,
what do those places
hot
have in
climate, and also
common?
too crime rates when it's hot higher.
Yeah, I bet you places that are hotter have crazy crime rates as well. I wouldn't be surprised. But I think it puts you in a relaxation mode, like constantly, because you're just trying to get away from the heat all the time. We're like sometimes it's too hot, so like you're like, oh, I'm gonna stay indoors, or I need to go into the ocean and chill. But this Latin American countries are always warm, and they're just super laid back people.
My
Like I
prediction
think
is
there's
that
something
this
to it.
podcast is going to spur unconsciously a narrative change, and in about 4 to 6 months, we're going to start seeing people posting threads on why you need to live in a place with multiple seasons.
Oh, I've been telling people this like in
Yeah,
person a lot recently. Because everybody's always like Miami sun all the time. I'm like, man, like I'm actually it's 100% certain
yeah,
that seasonal changes are better
yep.
for you.
Well, also too, like we just know from like cold
And
showers
then
and hot
there's something
showers,
like
like that's a microcosm of this, right?
yes, there's something yeah, right. Like winter is a
Yep.
time to build grit. Like winter is the grind season for me.
Yeah.
And grind and then what's summer? The shine season.
Well, I
Think
remember
about it.
that. Yeah, and then like we were talking about too, or like Emerson was talking about earlier. There's the. I remember that video that you posted where you were just driving through very calmly, like that. Just like those snowy roads, and like seeing those nice buildings all lit up, just like very smooth country drive. Like you don't get that in Miami. You don't get that in the hot climates. You don't get to experience the beauty of snowfall and like harmony.
Right. I guarantee I never grew up in like a California or a warm climate like Arizona or Florida. But I guarantee you Christmas and Thanksgiving don't feel the
They
same
don't.
there.
Source Californian.
I guarantee you they don't. Like how you gonna have a Christmas tree and lights up
Yeah,
and like you know
exactly.
it's not gonna
Oh, it
snow.
always felt whack.
Like and like we could debate like why if Christmas should be a holiday or any of that stuff. I don't really care about that. It's cozy, it brings people together, and it's fun. So like I enjoy it. But like it never felt the same when I was in like Florida or anything like that. Like I can't imagine it does in these warm places. But there is something about like the end of the year is supposed to be like family time. Because that's when you're supposed to be relying on each
Yeah.
other for survival the most, right? So there's something bigger going on.
So we move to number two.
Yeah, let me see where I'm at. Oh, this is before we go to part two of what beauty is. He says this was funny to me because I'll tell you why. But beauty of nature, which is seen and felt as beauty, is the least part. The shows of day, the dewy morning, the rainbow, mountains, orchids in a blossom, stars, moonlight, shadows in still water, and the like, if too eagerly hunted, become shows merely, and mock us with their unreality. So this part that made me think was they say if too eagerly hunted, they become shows merely, and then mock us with their unreality. It reminds me of Instagram, where it's like people are going into nature for the picture or for saying that they went there. And when you do things like that, you take away the beauty of something. If you're too eagerly hunting it just for it to be a show, then you don't actually get to enjoy it. It's like one of those memes where like everybody's at a concert and they've got their phones up recording and there's that one person in the crowd that is actually just listening to the music and enjoying and dancing and singing. Like it reminded me of that kind of
Mm-hmm.
mindset and culture that we see now, where people don't do things for the spiritual growth or the emotional growth
Or just
or
like the
benefit
silent,
of it.
yeah,
They
or
do it
just like
more for the show of it.
yeah,
Yeah, or just for the peace.
the silent
Like
growth, the inner. It's all about the outer. It's all about showing others.
right. So you don't even get the peace that comes from it when you approach things in that manner. So I think like it's kind of like instead of like chasing this one
Yep.
sunset, just appreciate all of them.
So for You good with
So
this
the
part?
second
You said
part,
your
yeah,
piece for first part. Okay. So
yeah,
I
we can
love
move
how the
on to the
second
second
part
part.
opens up. The presence of of a higher, namely of the spiritual element, is essential to its perfection. The high and divine beauty, which can be loved without effeminacy, is that which is found in combination with the human will. Beauty is the mark God sets upon virtue. Every natural action is graceful. Every heroic action is also decent and causes the place and the bystanders to shine. We are taught by great actions that the universe is the property of every individual in it. Every rational creature has all nature for his dowry and estate. It is his if he will.
So my favorite part of all this, first of all, is where he says divine beauty, which can be loved without effeminacy. I'm gonna start saying I can love things without effeminacy. I
Yeah,
just thought that was a really cool
especially
statement,
modern.
a really
Like
cool.
there's so much. I don't know. We just have a really fucked up sense of what love is in modern culture.
Right, like it's not
Yeah,
masculine
yeah.
love
Like
or something like that.
it's like the only context in which love can happen is like romantic in a sense.
Yes,
It's like
that's also true. It's like the only type of love that people
this like
believe in.
explicit outward, affection. It's like the only way. It's probably due to our like highly visual, you know, overstimmed culture. Probably a symptom of that. But that's a sad thing.
So it's like I can
I
be
like
love
beauty
without
is the mark God
effeminacy.
sets upon virtue.
But yes, virtue is beauty. Every natural action is graceful. This made me think
Hmm.
about the movements of animals. Like every animal just seems
Yeah,
to move so well. They're so natural. Their movements just it's undisturbed the
yeah. There's no
by
tightness.
life. Like our yeah, exactly. Like it's so fluid and smooth. And slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And it's like our movement's
Yeah, dude.
so jacked
It's
up in comparison. And we are
it's one
mostly
of the
the ones that
benefits
have
of having a
destroyed it.
cat actually, because you get to watch that cat move all day, and you realize how janky and clunky that you move compared to that. You watch this like,
Animals
yeah,
rarely waste movement. And it's like they know how to do it
it's like
naturally. It's
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
amazing.
The reminds me, everyone listening to this cast, go read
But
the Supple Leopard. It's a great book.
yes, Kelly Starr. We are taught by great actions that the universe is property of every individual in it. This is touching more on what he talked about earlier, right? He says, and every rational creature has all nature for his dowry and state. Like the universe is available to him who would use it. Nature and all these things are working for you behind the scenes. All you have to do is use it, right? Like this is literally what he was saying. I think maybe in the introduction. Let me see. Yeah, it's basically the same thing he was saying. It's like undoubtedly we have no questions to ask which are unanswerable. We must trust the perfection of creation, so far as to believe that whatever curiosity the order of things has awakened in our minds, the order of things can satisfy. And then he says, every man's condition is a solution in hieroglyphic. Everything is working in your favor. And it's just yours if you choose to use it.
All those things for which men plow, build, or sail obey virtue, said Sallust. The wind and the waves, said Gibbon, are always on the side of the ablest navigators. Right, just like you're saying. Everything is there to be used. And I mean, you've noticed this phenomena too, right? When you decide to do something virtuous or good, something just like purely out of like an instinctive need to do it, no sort of, uh, no sort of like pro con risking it out in your head, just like that's the right thing to do. I'm going to do it. The universe just kind of opens up and allows you to complete it. Things happen out of nowhere that you
Right.
would
Like
not have predicted that allow it to come to fruition.
I think we talked about this the first podcast that I ever did with you. where I was like, I made it to certain places
Mm-hmm.
on almost on accident, just by having it in my mind that this is what I wanted and just moving forward, whether in an efficient or non-efficient way. And it's like, and remember, I was like, man, I'm going to start manifesting more and actually focusing on things because I seem to end up exactly
Yep.
where I imagine that I want to be. It's just the path and the journey that you get there is unclear. And obviously, I also believe that like the speed at which you go is determined by you and by your focus and by your discipline and by being able to hold that picture in your mind's eye. But there have been things that I've manifested and moved towards without really focusing on too much, just knowing that this is a general direction I want to be in. So it's like, what'll happen if you actively use that power on an everyday basis and that focus and that vision on an everyday basis? Like you're going to get the things that you want faster. I honestly can't imagine a world where things don't work out in my favor because I've reverse engineered my life to the point where it's like specific actions should yield
Mm-hmm.
me specific results. And all I have to do is get there. One sentence that struck out to me that supports all this. So he says, nature stretches out her arms to embrace man. Only let his thoughts be of equal greatness. So it's like a lot of people don't have what they want because they sell themselves short. It's kind of the cliche, like shoot for the stars because if
Yeah.
you fall, you land on a cloud. But that's really the mindset you have to be in. Shooting so far that to fall short is still an accomplishment.
Yeah. Only let his thoughts be of equal scope, and the frame will suit the picture. Right there. A virtuous man. Yeah.
Like, are your thoughts equal to all that to what is available and what is possible? That's what you have to ask yourself. Like, I don't. Most
Yeah.
people aren't thinking big enough. It's almost impossible to think too big. Like, there's certain things that are a waste of time to think about. Like, don't try to think about going to the league or something like that when you're like 30 years old and 5'7", right? Like, you're not gonna go to the NBA, but like, there are things that are that you can't even imagine that are within your reach if you would only envision them and
Yep.
believe in them and then work towards them. Like, you can have what you dream of, and I think each person that would listen to this is sensible enough to think about what's possible, because there's a difference between what's there's a possibility and there's a probability, right? Like some things are possible but not probable.
But you can definitely increase your chances if you know it. If you understand what you want, that's the biggest thing to increase your chances. Right there.
So I like to look at things that I know are possible and probable. Like there's still there's a good chance I can do it, and I think every person listening to this is smart enough to figure out what is an astronomical dream and goals that are
Mm-hmm.
actually reasonable at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 'Cause
And that's usually something that's not like if it's something that's like time sensitive that you have to do like 10 years ago, then it's probably not something to focus on. But like most people's goals, like getting into a certain physical shape, making a certain amount of money, being friends with certain types of people, dating certain types of women, like that's
yep.
all possible.
100%.
You can have everything imagined. I've manifested everything that you can think of. I've I've manifested opportunities. I've manifested uh, investments. I've manifested relationships, like work relationships, female relationships, everything. Simply by having a vision, because when you have a vision, you
Yep.
know what you're
And
looking
also
for.
too, just yeah, it's weird. Like we are talking about, there's an unexplained angle to it where things just happen. You just things come out of the blue once you have that vision and it's set in stone and you're working towards it. Things come out of the blue, just randomly. And a good way to tell if you're out of your vision or you're not doing all the things you do is when you stop getting those random things. When those stop coming, that's a good indication that you're kind of off course. Your focus is off, right? But when you're
Yes.
focused, opportunities come and they keep coming.
When whoever sees a person of powerful character and happy genius will have remarked how easily he took all things with him. The persons, the opinions, and the day and nature become ancillary to a man. So, like he's saying, everything is still the same idea. Everything is available for you to use. And the powerful people who are like who are with the powerful characters who you see as geniuses, they've all the people, the opinions, the day, nature have come to support him. That's what he's saying by become ancillary to him. They're all in his support and conspiring for his
I think
favor.
that's a goal for all of us. Become a person of powerful character and happy genius. I love that.
So here, go down to the third part of
Third and
beauty.
final part of beauty, right here. This is its relation to the intellect. There is still another aspect under which the beauty of the world may be viewed, namely as it becomes an object of the intellect. Besides the relation of things to virtue, they have a relation to thought. The intellect searches out the absolute order of things as they stand in the mind of God and without the colors of affection. So this is the objective part of us that seeks to understand what is. How do things connect? Not tainted with our own thought, not our own feelings and conditions in the moment.
There was an interesting part here where he says the intellectual and the active powers seem to succeed each other, and the exclusive activity of the one generates the exclusive activity of the other. So when I think he says intellectual and active powers, I think he's literally saying thought and action. Thought and action seems
Yeah,
to succeed each other, and the exclusive activity of the one generates the exclusive
very
activity
true.
of the other. There's something unfriendly in each to the other, right? Like if you're acting, you're not thinking. If you're
Yeah,
thinking, you're not acting.
it's yin yang.
But
It's that eternal cycle. Like he says, yeah. When you're sitting here, writing and you're in like a resting mode, you're thinking of things to do. And when you're doing things, thoughts come in your head about, planning the next step and ideas that you need to like sit down and figure out. Yep.
they work just like the seasons. Thought is
Yep.
winter, action is summer. I like what he says here. Nothing divine dies. All good is eternally reproductive. The beauty of nature reforms itself in the mind, and not for barren contemplation, but for new creation. Nothing divine dies. Oh, this is my favorite line here. He says,
Is
"The love
taste.
of beauty, or this love of beauty is taste. The love of beauty is taste." Because I talk about this all the time. You cannot teach good taste. Why do you think there's so much ugliness in the world with all these new architectures and the way they build things? Because they have bad taste. They don't really love beauty, so they don't create it.
Yeah.
Like you can't teach taste. Like either, and this is like goes back to his whole. He's talked about this in this before, where he's just like, you have to be in a certain mind state, mentally and physically, to be able to appreciate the world around you and to see the beauty in the
Yeah.
world around
If
you in
you're
the right
sick,
way.
it's a hell of a lot harder.
If you're sick, you can't have good taste. You can't love the beauty in the right way. You can't distinguish between what is beautiful and what really isn't. And we're seeing a lot of that in today's world. Is that people don't have taste because they don't love true beauty.
Yeah, like you said, look at some of the buildings they're
You know?
building now.
Right. Like look at the artwork today. Like it can only come from people that don't appreciate beauty in the right way.
They said,
Like it's not as subjective as everyone makes it. It's weird because like in nature, it would, and he think he even talks about this in a moment where he's like, every single thing is unique, but it has its own beauty to it. but I don't think the rules of nature apply necessarily to the rules of man. Like where everything that man creates is beautiful just because it's a
No,
part of nature now because we
I don't
created it.
think
It
so
doesn't
either.
work exactly the same. I think the beauty of why nature is always beautiful is
I
because
mean,
it's
man has the
pure.
choice, right? Man has the
And
choice. At the end of the day, he can choose to create ugliness in the world, or he could choose to create beauty and embody nature.
right. So this love of beauty is taste. Others have the same love in such excess that, not content with admiring, they seek to embody it in new forms. The creation of beauty is art. So where he says others have the same love in such excess, what he means is artists have this love in such excess that, not content with just viewing it, they seek to embody it in new forms. And here I think like we can use the word artist loosely. Like to be an artist, you don't have to just be someone that draws or paints. Like you just have to be someone that creates, that
Well,
seeks to
he says
display
the
nature
creation
in
of
new
beauty is
forms,
art.
right?
So somebody that creates beauty is an artist, and that doesn't have to be a. That's not. We're not talking about a
Right,
medium. We're talking about just anything.
right,
That could be in your life. That could be in
exactly.
conversation,
Like,
right? That could be. We use the word artistic and artistry to describe so many things. It's when the skill level is so high that it seems like a work of art. That's the creation of beauty.
yes, the creation of beauty is art. So if you create beauty, you're an artist. And there's many ways to create beauty. And like you said, you can create beauty in how you treat people. You can create beauty through reproduction. You can create beauty with the ideas that you spread amongst the world. You create beauty with your physical body. You can create beauty by building things, growing things. You can create beauty by dancing, by singing, by doing martial arts. That's
Yep.
art, the creation of beauty. A work of art is an abstract or epitome of the world. It is the result or expression of nature in miniature. This was interesting to me because I was thinking about like all these cathedrals or the pyramids, how they all line up with sacred geometry and have like the
Yes.
golden ratio in it and all this complex math. And it's like that appears in the universe at the
Yep.
cellular level or at the atomic level. It's like a work of art is an abstract or epitome of the world. It is the result or expression of nature in miniature. So it's like these buildings, some of them were like their nature condensed. And when you inspect them closely enough, you see that they line up with the rules of nature and the same mathematics that control everything around us.
It's all the Fibonacci sequence. It's all of that.
Right. It's like what's that one picture where it goes from like a cell to like a group of cells and it shows you that like stars and
Hmm.
galaxies and everything look the same. And then it shows you all the sacred geometry and it shows like as above, so below. Art is an
It's one
abstract
of those
or
things that's
epitome
all
of the
around
world.
us, and if you have eyes to see, it's really easy to see. But most of us don't have eyes to see. We're so tied up in our own petty bullshit that we don't see that. We don't appreciate that. We would all live very, very differently if that was at the forefront of our minds.
Although the works of nature are innumerable and all different, the result or the expression of them all is similar and single. Nature is a sea of forms radically alike and even unique. A leaf, a sunbeam, a landscape, the ocean make an analogous impression on the mind. What is common to them all, the perfectness and harmony, is beauty.
The standard of beauty is the entire circuit of natural forms, the totality of nature, which the Italians express by defining beauty. I'm not Italian, so I'm going to butcher this, but il più nel uno. Nothing is quite beautiful alone. Nothing but is beautiful in the whole. A single object is only so far beautiful as it suggests this universal grace. The poet, the painter, the sculptor, the musician, the architect seek each to concentrate this radiance of the world on one point, and each in his several work to satisfy the love of beauty which stimulates him to produce.
Yeah, this is great. So, though the works of nature are innumerable and they're all different, the expression is the same. And though they're alike, they're also unique. But the one thing they have in common is perfectness and harmony, and that's beauty.
It's this interesting thing. We see with our eyes the perfectness of nature, and there's an intercourse with the soul when it passes through our eye into the spirit and the soul and whatnot. And we have this urge to express that same principle out, whether that's through an action, whether that's through a piece of art. There's a constant interplay of what we see and what we give out.
Yes, we are a part of all of this. Like, we have to be here to experience it, right?
And we have to be here to create with it as well.
Here we go towards the end. He says, the world thus exists to the soul to satisfy the desire of beauty. This element I call an ultimate end. No reason can be asked or given why the soul seeks beauty. Beauty, in its largest and profoundest sense, is one expression for the universe. God is the all fair. Truth and goodness and beauty are but different faces of the same all. I love that.
But beauty in nature is not ultimate. It is the herald of inward and eternal beauty, and it is not alone a solid and satisfactory good. It must stand as a part, and not as yet the last or highest expression of the final cause of nature. To me with that, I always think
Yes,
about
I love.
how there's some extremely attractive people blessed with great genetics and all that stuff who are just trash human beings. Like their actual life is just garbage, and they treat others terribly, and they're suffering, and they put their suffering on others. All that stuff. Hollywood stars are an angle right there.
Yeah, there has to be some sort of synergy. Like a truly good person can never be
Yeah.
hideous, right? And I like how it says like truth and goodness and beauty are different
Hmm.
faces of the same all. Like truth is the creation of beauty, just like goodness is the creation of beauty, or just like he was. I forgot what I was gonna say. I lost my spot, but yeah, truth and goodness are beauty, and
Yeah.
beauty are but
It's
different
a
faces
it's
of
it's
the
a
same
strain.
all.
It's a strain of nature. It's not the totality of nature.
Okay, it's to remind me of. Remember, he was like,
Right.
virtue is beauty, right? It's the same concept here, where it's like all of these are the same, and we experience them. That's why he also talked about when you see someone doing great things, it's beautiful as well. Let's see. Let me see that.
The mark of virtue.
Uh, no, there's another part.
We're reading as we're doing this, people. We have the
Right.
books right in front of us. This
Yeah.
is this isn't
Yeah.
pre-rehearsed. None
Right.
of this stuff. This is raw. We're just talking about this. So
Yeah, I can't find the
What's the
actual
essence
quote
of
that
what
I
you're
was
trying to
looking
say,
up
though?
before, but basically he was saying like there's beauty in just people
Oh, yeah.
conquering and doing amazing things, which is continuing the point that all these things like virtue and truth and goodness and beauty, they're all the
It
same
sounds like what we
thing.
read in Courage.
Good, goodness. It's good versus evil. Like there's just good and there's evil. And like the good is like it
Right.
all folds into itself. And the evil
The
like folds
order and
into itself.
chaos, Bucko. All that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Creation and destruction, you know? So yeah, that's the first part of nature. The next time we record on nature, we're gonna do start off with a chapter called language, which is actually my
Sick.
favorite chapter of the entire book, I believe. But I've been rereading it again, so maybe my opinion will change. But I think for the most part,
Yeah,
it's
I
my
think
favorite
we're
part of
going
the
to
entire book.
do language and discipline next. I think that'll be it. Yeah. So, guys, I hope y'all enjoyed nature. It was really a it's always a treat to reread this stuff and deeper and have a conversation about it. His every single time, I'm surprised with the visuals that he's able to convey with text every single time.
Yeah, and I seem to learn something every time I read it. I pick up something different, and that's what I like about it. And I like being reminded of things as well. So I'm excited to do language, and I'm excited to do Oversoul as well.